Good evening, Black people and all allies fighting for Black liberation, Black prosperity, and Black joy. I'm Charles Blow, and welcome to Prime. Former President Barack Obama is sounding the alarm on Republicans' efforts to gerrymander their way to victory. The former president told a virtual audience at a fundraiser yesterday the stakes could not be higher. Rather than argue based on ideas, Republicans are trying to tilt the playing field, and they aren't even waiting for Election Day to do it. When it comes to voting rights bills, the former president said he's still confident that Biden Democrats will deliver, saying this: "I never bet against Nancy Pelosi. Chuck Schumer is committed to this. President Biden is committed to this and making this work." Vice President Harris met with Black female leaders Monday, and although she reportedly started out the meeting talking about voting rights, it's unclear what other than more voting engagement and town halls were discussed. Meanwhile, the GOP's gerrymandering efforts are already causing disruptions in some states. The North Carolina Supreme Court just ruled their 2022 primary races will be pushed back by 2 months as lawsuits challenging the Republican-drawn maps are resolved in the courts. One bit of good news tonight: a judge in Georgia just cleared the way for lawsuits challenging the state's restrictive new voting laws to move forward, after several state officials had asked them to be tossed. All that as a coalition of 75 progressive groups in Republican-led states sent a letter to Schumer calling for action on voting rights. The group wrote, "We do not see a future where any Republicans, let alone 10, join with you to vote in favor of structural democratic reforms. Trust us, we've tried. That's why we need you and your caucus to do whatever it takes to pass these critical democratic reform bills in the Senate, even if that means eliminating reforming the filibuster." Golden State Warrior Steph Curry is also calling on the Senate to pass voting rights, releasing this ad with the grassroots group Represent Us.
Hey, I'm Stephen Curry from the Golden State Warriors.
The greatest shooter this game has ever seen.
But I'm also Team Democracy, and we've got some work to do. After a huge turnout in the 2020 election, 19 states enacted 33 different laws that make it harder for their citizens to vote. We need everyone to call their senators and tell them you want to see the Freedom to Vote Act passed so that we all can make our voices heard.
Joining me now to discuss is President of People for the American Way, Ben Jealous, and joining us by phone is one of the Black female leaders who met with Vice President Harris this week, President and CEO of the National Coalition of Black Civic Participation, Melanie Campbell. Melanie, I want to start with you. Can you give us any readout on what was discussed at that meeting as it pertains to voting rights?
Yes. Hey, how are you? Sorry I can't be there.
I'm fine. Yes, I'm asking for any readout you can possibly give us about what was discussed at that meeting with the Vice President.
Well, I'm trying, Charles. I'm trying. But I just wanted to make sure we're clear that it was definitely a follow-up, and so part of that was to find out where they were on some of our recommendations. We surely talked about voting rights and the need, and from the top that we needed them to really do more. From that bully pulpit, for her to do more, for the Biden and Harris administration to do more when it comes to voting rights, and that we don't have any more time. So that's number one. And then we also talked about some of the things that in our recommendations from the last meeting were things that could be done through the Department of Corrections when it comes to returning citizens, and how that they can do more when it comes to providing access to the ballot through the Department of Education and through Housing and Urban Development. So those were some of those recommendations. The other things that we discussed in that meeting were about the Build Back Better, and also maternal health, which was coming up the next day, and several of our women leaders were a part of that. So that was in that 1 hour, the broad strokes of the conversation. The other was for her and how the role she plays in getting out there more, importance of that, not getting ahead of the president, but in her role as vice president to really get out there more and engage in recommending that as in the next day, just yesterday, we continue to push also with the Senate, but how they can use their bully pulpit. They have to do more. They have to really show the sense of urgency. So that's in a nutshell.
Right. Ben, but right now they are, consciously not using the bullet pulpit in that way. The vice president, as Melanie was just explaining, vice president can't get in front of the president. Whatever the president wants to have happen is what's going to happen. If he wants her out more, then she'll be out more. If he doesn't want to press this issue right now while he's dealing with other legislative issues, he won't do it. How do you interpret what is clearly a conscious strategy not to put on too much pressure on the voting rights front while they are dealing with other issues?
I've recently been locked up 4 times for protests in front of the White House on this issue. It is absolutely time for Joe Biden to be clear with the Senate that they need to pave the way for an up or down vote on the Voting Rights Act. Vice President Harris has done great work getting consensus in the Senate. We have 51 votes. We believe that majorities matter in this country. They should matter in the U.S. Senate as well. And whenever we've had to make a carve out in the filibuster, whenever we've had to pave a way for an up or down vote through that filibuster, it's really taken the president of the United States to do it. It's been done 160 times before. There's nothing sacred about the filibuster. Joe Biden just needs to call on his party in the Senate to go ahead and clear a path for the vote.
Melanie, do you believe that we're running out of time? We've had people on the air here in some of the states that have been affected, namely in this particular scenario, Texas. They've already started to run in the districts that have been gerrymandered. They start early voting, I think, as early as February. There's a certain point at which the courts are simply not going to step in because it will be an undue burden on the electoral process. Is 2022 already kind of too late for them to step in and do something?
Well, I think the sense of urgency and the state of emergency is real. As my brother Ben talked about, we've been how he are pushing from the streets as well as engaging in the inside of the Congress. But yeah, we're at that point, and I'm really concerned that if we don't get these federal voting rights reform done before the end of the year, just like they're working through the debt ceiling, they could work through voting rights. And even today, just pushing folks in the Senate to do what needs to be done. And it's not just Senator Manchin, as I know Ben knows this as well as I do. It's more of them in there that need to be pushed to make sure they get this done. Heaven forbid it doesn't. January, I would just say, is drop dead. I mean, in
Right.
short order, I think December, but surely beyond January, then you're going to have elections being run. You're going to have, if you have no way to push back on the partisan gerrymandering that's going on, that is clearly has a racial, a negative racial impact on communities of color, Black folks and brown folks across this country with the way they're doing these redistricting lines, that we are talking about an impact that will be decades in the making that will reverse us back to pre-Voting Rights Act of 65.
Ben, Schumer has, I think on a couple of occasions recently, hinted at some way of moving on voting rights without altering the filibuster and doing that before Christmas. Do you have any clue what he's talking about?
They have many options. I think what Leader Schumer's talked about is they don't have to get rid of the filibuster. They don't even have to create a carve out. They can reform it. Joe Manchin has tried to get 10 Republicans. That's not going to happen at this point. And so they can fix the filibuster. They can nix the filibuster. They can create a carve out in the filibuster. They can reform the filibuster. There's multiple options. They got to deal with it. And it's really not going to happen until the president frankly, backs up Leader Schumer, just like they've done on this roads and bridges bill, and really drives it through the Senate. There is pressure that can be brought to bear on senators in the president's party that only he can bring to bear, and he's got to lead. He promised to have voters' backs. He promised to have black voters' backs. They had his back. We had his back, and yet we aren't seeing it, and it's a problem.
Melanie, I have about a minute left here. One thing that we've been concentrating on this show about is what seems to be a concentrated effort to draw black legislators out of their districts. We've had a couple of cycles now where we keep, pumping our fists and saying a record number of minorities in Congress. Well, that may not be the case if they get their way with the redrawing of these maps. Are you worried that black lawmakers are being targeted to be redrawn out of their districts?
Oh yes, that's a fact. That's a fact. Texas, right? Georgia, right? As key examples of what's happening with how the lines are being drawn and pitting folks like Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee and Congressman Al Green, putting them in the same district where there should have been at least I'm not looking at it right here. I want to say two districts in Texas that should have been, especially on the census numbers. They actually ignored those numbers of population growth and have redrawn them so that they could have two more white districts. So yeah, and so when you talk about shifting power, this shifting power without the first vote being taken in 2022, just by how these lines are being drawn.
Right.
And we don't have a Supreme Court that's going to be helpful, and that's we already know that. So if we don't have a legislative fix, then the Department of Justice can't do what it needs to do because they don't have the power to do it. And lawsuits are not going to get there. It takes too long. It has to be legislative change.
Right. Lawsuits are not going to get. I'm glad
takes too long. And the lawyers are telling us that. The LDF, Cheryl, they're telling us we cannot sue our way out of this situation.
Congress has to act. Ben Jealous and Melanie Campbell, thank you both for joining me tonight. Appreciate your time.